capacity vacuum in their system. So we started with iTech in basic training of issues that would help them go and run their own governments. Of course, today, in the 70 years, both the quantum and the scope of work has increased substantially, as represented by KEC, RPG, and Shapurji. We have gone into infrastructure building. We have gone into education. IT, information technology, has become a major part of our training program. Of course, general education is one of the largest portfolios that we carry. And we also realize that the largest challenge that comes to us in our own region is connectivity, and India has to take the lead. And of course, we have also been guided by the principle of non-reciprocity, that what we do need not necessarily be returned either in cash or kind. So it is a part of solidarity with the South that we do. With these words, I would invite Prashant to give you the official perspective on how he sees India's development partnership progressing. So Prashant, it's...
Thank you, sir. Good morning to all of you. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. I think this session is focused more on Indian experience, and I think we are mostly part of the implementation brigade, if I can say so. Particularly happy to have Mr. Amar Sinha chair this session, who was our former boss as Secretary Economic Relations. And I'm also very happy to see so many companies who are very strong partners of ours as we execute this development partnership. So just to give you a very sort of quick snapshot, and I think I'll just focus on three important pillars, which is capacity building, using some of the grants, and of course the concessional credit, the lines of credit with which I deal with. So as Mr. Sinha mentioned, the capacity building program of India is actually, predates even our own independence. And the iTech program, the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation, has been really the flagship program. On since 60s, and more than 165 countries have partnered under this program with us. Today we have almost 11,000 training slots available to the experts, to government officials and others from a very large number of partner countries, and there are more than 300 courses managed by more than 70 premier institutions in India. And the course really vary. I mean, you name it, from agriculture to management to finance to ICT, you name it, and there are courses available as per the needs and priorities of the partner governments. And that really is the key point. Our development partnership is need-based, demand-driven. It is as per the national priorities. So it's really for partner governments to choose what they want. And if we have the capacities, we are very happy to engage with them. In iTech, just to mention that we are also doing a comprehensive review of what we all offer, make it more future-oriented. So just to give an example, looking at things like artificial intelligence or Industry 4, or looking at solar, for example. So I'll come back to solar time and again, because it's a matter of renewables, is a matter of passion for our team, right from Prime Minister downwards. So Prime Minister announced 500 training slots in solar, and we have quickly sort of designed with International Solar Alliance 175 slots, which will be happening in coming months, and then there'll be iteration again. Quickly to come on the grants part. So the grant parts partly complement our effort in capacity building. So we set up a number of IT and skilling centers in our partner countries. Just to give you one small example, which is going to be set up, is the Gandhi Mandela Skilling Center, which Prime Minister announced when he recently visited South Africa. So we have several such entrepreneurship development centers or vocational skilling centers in various countries, where a very interesting feature is that during the first half or till in the afternoon, there is a training imparted to a number of people. And, we are really looking at vocational skills here, things like welding or small industry. And those who learn and get trained then actually operate these machines in the later part of the day for their own employment. So it's a very nice model which is getting replicated. Of course, in grants, we also deal with infrastructure development. I think the examples are well known. I mean, looking at situation like Bhutan, for example, hydroelectric dams, or going even to the areas like heritage preservation and restoration, etc. Now, coming to the third element which I deal with is the lines of credit. So, among all three elements, that's probably the new kid, of the block, so to speak. We started our concessional credit program in a structured manner only for about past, I would say, 13, 14 years ago. I think DPA per se was set up only around 2011-12. But in that short span of time, we have rapidly expanded our outreach. So currently, our lines of credit program works with 61 partner countries. There are more than 262 LOCs which have been operationalized, and our aggregate commitments under these total almost $25.7 billion. So a quick and sort of rapid scaling up of our commitments under our concessional credit. The concessional credit, there are several categories. I will not go into those details, but looking at some examples from our partners like ECOWAS, Bank for Investment and Development, EBID, their studies on the kind of credit which has been given through EBID to ECOWAS countries has some fairly positive sort of effect on the recipients of those LOCs. These lines of credit are actually also available in a very wide sort of sector. So again, be it a sugar plant to a hydroelectric power plant to simply supply of projects like, for example, rail coaches and engines and taking on infrastructure development. So very wide range is available. We of course focus a lot on Africa. So out of these 61 countries, 41 are actually in Africa. But South Asia remains another very high priority as per our neighborhood first policy. So, some of the projects which we do through our concessional line of credit help South Asia shape its own narrative on regional connectivity. So just to give you a small example, under one of the LOCs to Nepal, the LOC one of $100 million, which was, I think, extended around 2008, if I'm not wrong, more than 500 kilometers of roads were built in Nepal, and there are more under progress. Major bridges like the Bhairav and Titas bridge in Bangladesh, which were inaugurated last year, or even upgradation of the entire Sri Lankan railway network. A very large part of it is being done through our concessional lines of credit. Of course, for Africa, when we did the IFS 3 summit, we announced $10 billion worth of LOC. So we are gradually moving towards that objective. And I mentioned the International Solar Alliance founding conference, where we looked at renewable sector, and we are actually implementing a very large number of solar projects as well now. So these are of course demand driven and priority based, but at the same time they also help our industry. I think some of the key partners are here. So when it comes to things like promoting Make in India, I think our companies have sort of taken on the challenge, and we are very happy to see that now some of our best companies are present in that space. We have also learned by our experience, so and it's a constant process of streamlining, making the process better. So we realized some of the shortcomings in our previous processes, and thereafter we implemented something we call it Ideas Guidelines in December 2015. After which a lot of streamlining has been done, and there's a great emphasis on transparency, on creating a level playing field, and at the same time the processes remain the ownership of the processes remain with the partner governments. So we do realize that the processes can still be slightly long, and so there's our continuous effort in improving the procedures. And for that, we work very closely with our partner governments. And I'll stop here by just informing the audience about one of the things which we set up. we realized that we were giving almost end-to-end support for the entire sort of process, but we were not present in the space of the project design, because we realized that many a times the partner countries, they enunciated a need, but they really didn't know how to develop the proposal, or more, it was a case of capacity constraints. So we set up something called a project preparation facility just in this January, where we provide, so this PPF operates slightly differently than, for example, what World Bank or ADB does. So we actually provide, free of cost consultancy support to our partners to develop such projects proposals. It's a fairly tight process, so within about 6 weeks of a request being made, which is just a simple one-page kind of a format, we are able to identify a consultant and quickly deploy the person or the company on the ground to create these feasibility studies. So it's a rapidly expanding engagement, but we are very heartened to see the kind of response and partnerships we are able to generate. I'll stop here and I'll come back, I think, at the Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving us an overview. And I must compliment MEA for creating this consultancy support system, because that was one major challenge that we always faced. The utilization of the lines of credit was very low because the partner countries couldn't perhaps conceptualize and give us a detailed feasibility report. So I think this will overcome this lacuna. Talking of Bhutan, which some people have also called as Button, but it is Bhutan. Actually, Bhutan is an amazing story of success, where we created a win-win model in fully exploiting Bhutan's hydropower potential with complete buyback by India, so much so that Bhutan either this year or next year is graduating into a middle-income country, and it will be the first in South Asia. In addition to what you mentioned about the process ownership by the host partner countries, I would also say not only the process but also the end product remains under the ownership of the partner country, and that's a key differentiator. Of course, South Asia is a priority. So solar projects, I just want to compliment that of the $10 billion that was earmarked for Africa, which was announced at the IAFS 3, we set aside 20% of that only for solar after the inauguration of the International Solar Alliance, and that I think is something we will push the renewable agenda substantially, because that's a huge, it's nearly $2 billion worth of money that we are setting aside only for solar projects in Africa. With this, may I turn to Mr. Rajesh Tandon to give a perspective from the agencies which are very active on the ground, and also a forum which brings together all the aid or development partnership agencies of India and FIDC.
Thank you, Ambassador Sinha. Thank you all for this opportunity. I do want to, I'm glad that I've heard Mr. Agarwal and the excellent development partnership administration that is going on. I'm going to return to Forum of India Development Cooperation in a moment, but let me say a few things about how I look at development partnerships in South-South cooperation. I have spent, after initially teaching at Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta for a few years, spent the last 40 years as a member of what would be euphemistically called civil society. And I don't want to debate the contours of that civil society right now, but if you are happy or would like, I have written a great deal about it based on India's experience as well as internationally. In my view, South-South cooperation as well as the OECD DAC models and their various versions are predominantly, despite the rhetoric, remain state-led approaches. They are government-to-government modalities which dominate, and partnership arrangements are within government protocols. Public accountability mechanisms are still weak in South-South cooperation, weak to the extent that even the oversight parliamentary standing committees do not necessarily debate these on the basis of evidence. Nonetheless, it is important to acknowledge how changes are taking place, and several examples were given. You will hear more about it from the private sector participation in India. I think business, both public and private sector in India, because public sector is a large part of India's business environment, they act predominantly as a contractor. Once an agreement has been signed. While India does have a substantially internationally recognized international relations scholarship, engagement of academia in research is somewhat ambivalent. And even though FIDC as a platform has been around for 3.5 years, the relevance of civil society is only vaguely understood. 3 years ago, before the forum with African leadership took place here in Delhi in 2016, FIDC and RIS put together